I would have never expected that my job of helping people with their job interviews to resemble so much to one of a psychologist, especially in today's job market. So I thought I'd share with you my 2 cents about how to work on your fear of rejection with these job interviews. And I think the first test you should pass in this regard would be to pass an interview with yourself. 2 questions for you. Do you stand a chance to pass your upcoming job interviews? Because if you don't, then it makes little sense to prepare it in the first place. Most candidates do stand a chance. And then the second question becomes, do you really have a stress problem going into these job interviews? Because some people, do have a problem, a disease, so to speak, that they must address before going, that impairs their ability to perform, to prepare their job interviews, to focus and all of that stuff. So if you do have this problem, then yes, this must be addressed. What I can tell you is that 99% of candidates don't have this problem. The stress that you feel is actually a constructive thing that should motivate you to prepare and to perform better during these job interviews. So basically, if you don't suffer of bad stress and you do stand a chance to go into these job interviews, then basically you're good to go. You passed your interview with yourself. The second thing I'd like to share with you here is, how does perfectionism look like in job interviews? To give a simple definition of this from someone doing this for over 8 years, you only need 2 things to pass job interviews with high-performing companies. You need a great story bank, you need great stories, and to be able to role-play them, to communicate them well during these job interviews. You don't have to excel at any of these. You just have to find the right balance that works for you. If you have some amazing stories to share with your interviews but you can't speak, you cannot score reasonably well on clarity of thought to the extent you're unintelligible, you cannot pass your job interview. On the other hand, you can be a motivational speaker. If you don't have stories, if you're not capable, you don't have the expertise that they're looking for in the ideal candidate, again, you can communicate as good as you want, you will not be able to pass these interviews. Now, with respect to perfectionism, to perfect answers during job interviews and how important it is to give perfect answers during job interviews, what I can tell you is the best people I've worked with rarely gave perfect answers. Primarily talking about coaching sessions and about recorded interviews. Instead, these people focused on communicating the idea they wanted to transmit, which, spoiler alert, can often get quite messy, Sometimes it takes you 30 seconds to communicate the idea, sometimes it takes you 10 minutes. But it's not about delivering a perfect answer that looks amazing, but about selling yourself to the best of your knowledge in these interviews. So Storybank and Roleplay is the definition of these things. What is not perfectionism? What is perceived as perfectionism but really does not work in these job interviews? The first thing you should stay away from is to try to fit into a company's cultural values or leadership principles in the case of Amazon. And by the way, I'm a leadership coach. I pioneered Amazon interviewing advice on YouTube in 2018. And what I can tell you, one of the best conclusions I have from this experiment is that it's not the candidates who try to fit in those principles that did best in Amazon interviews. You'll be surprised how easy it is to pass these interviews using the role play and the story bank formula when compared, trying to fit into another culture. Because when you try to fit into a mold, you're automatically decreasing the power of your answers. Furthermore, many candidates, out of fear of rejection, go to great lengths for insider information into these job interviews, thinking that, hey, you know what, I take a shortcut with someone who maybe worked there, and this is how I will pass my job interviews. In my experience, this is far more overrated than you could actually link it to successful outcomes in these job interviews. Similarly, memorizing answers because you think, hey, I would give a perfect answer if I memorize it, also backfires, because what happens, you cannot memorize every possible answer, and then what happens, maybe if you give your introduction as an amazing answer and then the rest of your answer will sound, poorly. And the difference is that your introduction is not as important as communicating your expertise. So that's why you would do yourself a favor if you delivered a worse introduction and a better, so your other answers will be perceived more positively, right? So stop chasing, those dopamine pushes, dopamine rushes, if you want, with asking AI for feedback. There's no free lunch in passing these job interviews either. And last but not least, a secret weapon, which I found particularly efficient to deal with the fear of rejection, especially for job interviews, something that I learned from running a small business, and that is being more empathetic. The fact of the matter is, if you land a job interview with the FANG company, you're actually privileged to be in that role. Similarly, when you run a small business, you're privileged to work for yourself and be in this role. And when you put it this way, when you think from this perspective, the fear of rejection will actually something that will make far more sense. And it's actually maybe oftentimes more to your advantage to empathize a little bit and to understand that, hey, failure is a normal event in life. And at the end of the day, you will be also able to learn something and you take away something from that. Who knows, maybe that role was not indeed the type of role you were actually interested in, or maybe your ideas, maybe your answer, or maybe in a small business, maybe your idea on business wasn't the best course of action. So you do yourself a favor the faster you'll fail it to move on to some other more interesting activities or a better role that will better suit your needs. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.